Welcome to Not Your Ordinary Parts, a podcast where we talk about hard things associated with the human experience with the goal of increasing awareness, growth, and healing. You may hear information from professionally licensed therapists, life coaches, healers, doctors, etc. This information is not medical advice or therapy and is not meant to replace actual therapy or instructions given by a doctor or a personal therapist. I'm your host, Jalan Johnson. My guest today is Dr. Betty Kovacs. Dr. Kovacs is an extraordinary scholar, visionary, and leader whose work has had a transformative impact on the realms of consciousness, spirituality, and the intersection of science and the human existence. As a highly respected academic, author, and speaker, Dr. Kovacs' life and work are defined by her unwavering dedication to understanding the deeper layers of reality, the nature of the human experience, and the profound relationship between individuals, consciousness, and the universe. Dr. Kovacs' academic journey is both a testament to her intellectual brilliance and a reflection of her deeper curiosity into the mysteries of life. Her doctoral research, which explored the profound implications of ancient wisdom traditions and modern scientific thought, placed her on the forefront of a new wave of inquiry that seeks to integrate the metaphysical and the material. Beyond her scholarly achievements, she's a compassionate mentor and guide who has devoted her life to supporting others on their paths to awakening, offering guidance to individuals seeking deeper meaning and connection. Her work in the field of consciousness research and commitment to bridging the gap between science and spirituality has made her a pioneering force in the contemporary world of thought. Her thought leadership continues to inspire new generations of scholars, seekers, and spiritual practitioners to push beyond conventional boundaries and embrace the limitless potential of human consciousness, guiding humanity toward a greater understanding of itself and its place within the vast interconnected web of existence. So, Dr. Kovacs, welcome to the show, and thank you so much for being my guest.
That was beautiful. My goodness. Thank you.
All very true. And I gave a brief introduction, but so that the audience can get to know you a little bit better, would you mind giving us a little bit of background about yourself and how you got to who and where you are today?
Well, the where that you describe is wonderful. I'm not sure I know that person. But yes, I think I grew up, as many of us have grown up and are growing up today, just wondering what's the meaning of it? What's the deeper purpose of it? And truly, this isn't all there is to it. And I was plagued by that, I think, most of my life. And so that's what really made me even go to university. I didn't know any other way to try to find out anything. And of course, there I was up against a scientific, so-called scientific worldview that there's nothing but matter. You're not important. In fact, you're a fluke of nature. There's no meaning, no purpose. And when you're dead, that's it. And that's what we all have been and still are overshadowed by. And there's been no worse or even as bad a worldview as that ever among any people that we know. And I think that's why we have so much trauma and sorrow, and how we know somewhere in us, we know that there's got to be something meaningful to it all. Why would we even know the word meaning, right? Or purpose, if there weren't such a thing. So that was what really put me on the road of just trying to figure out what it's all about.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think a lot of us will agree that childhood often plants seeds for us to become who we are later in life, or for our work to have some sort of meaning, like you mentioned. Were there any events or moments in your early life that sparked your interest in psychology, spirituality, or the study of consciousness?
The thing that I grew up with also was the fear of death, because my mother's mother had died when she was young, and her mother had died when she was young. And I couldn't find any meaning she really carried my soul. And so I feared that if she died, it would all be over, because that was the only meaning. Of course, I love my father, and I was very close to my brother, who was 2 years older, but my mother really was the one who carried meaning and purpose for me. So I grew up with the horror of death, and she had dreamed that her mother died 2 years before she did. And when her mother died, everything that happened in the dream was exactly what happened in reality. And I was so afraid of losing her that I had a dream and that she died. And for 2 years, I was just absolutely certain in 2 years she would be dead. So there was a real trauma. Only she knew about that. I told her the dream, but no one else. And the 2 years were almost up, and I went to school that morning, and I got to the schoolyard, and some girls were jumping rope, and one of them yelled out and said, "Oh, I dreamed your mother died last night." And I was just traumatized. I just quickly went home and told my mother, and I was so afraid. I mean, that was the time was up, and someone dreamed it, and I think that really suggests that when we are really seriously involved in an emotional issue, we transfer it to other people and around us. It can be picked up, you know. Uh, so I really wanted to know: is that really all there is to it? Are we here to love so deeply and then lose those people forever? That just doesn't make sense. So that was the trauma part of it.
Mm. Thank you for sharing that. That's so personal, and like to you mentioned that if you believe in something so strongly, you can transfer it to someone else, and that's incredible. And I'm sure we will expound on that later. But with that being something that was so profound to you at such a young age, how did that, I guess, shape the nature of your reality about consciousness or spirituality?
You know, of course, as a young person, it's just happening in you and you're not thinking about the process or giving words to it, you know.
Sure.
All I knew is that I was afraid and I didn't want to lose her. And we moved also from one place to another. It was a completely new environment, so that accentuated it. Uh, all I knew is that I just had to figure something out. Something didn't seem right. Something
Mm,
was missing. And when I was in grade school, even, uh, I remember feeling like there's something missing, and I thought I need a drink of water. You know, in my childhood, it just translated to that. I want some water, I think, and I would drink it, but it didn't satisfy it. So there was always that something in me that's missing, and I think that that's true for so many people. You know, and of course, our culture is such that it tries to fill our lives with trivia and work and focusing on the official narrative, whatever it is at the time, so that we can't really think about those things. Our culture doesn't nourish the deepest longings in us. And when we really go out to seek an answer to those longings, we're usually on our own for a while,
mm.
as
I
I think
agree with that.
you have experienced, right?
Sure, indeed. So with these early experiences and this deeper longing to know more, how did that translate into your college experience? And was there anything in particular in college that you were drawn to specifically?
Well, you know, I decided that even though I wanted to understand how these things work inside us, I decided I didn't want to go into psychology because it was too academic, you know, and I thought, no, no, that's not. So I went into the humanities, into literature, because in literature, there couldn't really be an official narrative that you had to follow. You could look at each work of art and explore what was being experienced by the characters. And certainly, art itself is usually dissenting from the official narrative. You know,
Mm,
it's a way of voicing the other side that is not expressed, that is latent in us but not expressed. So I decided to go into the arts, which was mainly theater and literature. And I taught literature and writing when I was teaching college, and it was great because it allowed the students to get in touch with their feelings. You know, we were talking about individuals, not a theory, but individuals who had particular experiences and how it affected them. And so that really helped to open up uh, all of those feelings in people, in individuals.
mm. It sounds like you had a goal, but there wasn't like a defined path for it. So you
You're
made your
right.
own.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and I didn't even know sometimes why I was doing what I was doing, you know.
Mm,
But and you know also as we're growing up, there's so many things in life that we get involved in, and but and a lot of joy too, and people. And I love the college I went to. It was we had a lot of freedom. It wasn't a lot of strong academic competition and that kind of thing. It was really to explore and try to figure things out, you know. And so there was a lot of other things going on, but always there was that deep stream, that fundamental drive that I had to understand. I had to understand. Was it really true what science said? Are we really such insignificant beings? Is it really true that there's only this dimension of matter? And then there was the religion, that story that said that there is meaning, there is purpose, and that there is another dimension. But it wasn't really satisfactory for me because I didn't want to know it intellectually. I wanted to experience it. And Western religions destroyed the methods of experiencing and becoming the Christ, so to speak, having those experiences. And so it was just, you believe it. And I couldn't believe. So that was another problem. But that was actually, it was going in the right direction because I had to find the truth in me, you know. And that was a lifetime, you know, of exploring. I went to South America to work with shamans, and it wasn't until our son died that I really opened up and started having the kind of experiences I had been looking for. But that was a lifetime of focus and getting to that point. And it's, you know, when, as Khalil Gibran, the Lebanese writer, said, "How can my heart be open lest it be broken?" And maybe there's something to it, you know.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think a lot of us have that same burning desire to find this deeper meaning, but it can often be a very, very lonely road and filled with, so many roadblocks and fears. And I think when you really decide that nothing's going to stop you is when that path starts to open up. And it sounds like that's what happened for you.
And you stated beautifully what the myth tells us about the journey is that when you get to the point that you cannot you cannot go on without meaning, and you ask that question, how am I going to find this? I mean, I have got to find it. I intend to find it. The door to the labyrinth opens. And so what happens to us at that point is that every event in our lives is there for us to learn and grow and become. And the labyrinth is not a maze. If we stay on the path, we get to the center. And as the Hungarian classical scholar said so beautifully, that in the labyrinth we go around and down to the deepest part of who we are. And at the center, we confront the divine mind, they all, not as other, but as self. Isn't that beautiful?
So beautiful. Gave me goosebumps.
But you're on that journey because you just knew that's where you had to be, and the door opened. It knew you were determined, you know. And I think in my case too, it knew it's going to have to open that door for us, you know.
Right. I wanted to ask a question about college for you as a student versus a professor or a teacher. Because I know having such a drive and determination, you may have bumped heads with some professors that, may have known it all. But you did say that your school was different than the traditional schools. But I just wanted to see what college was like for you between those two distinctions.
Yes, and it was in the 50s, a long time ago.
Yes.
I was in college, and it was in a Christian college. And it was there that I realized that I couldn't believe, but I went because I was seeking meaning, and that was the only path to meaning that I could find. Science wasn't a path for me. And so I went to that college, and the professors were they were bright, they were very academic, professional, but they also realized that most of us who came there were looking for meaning and purpose. And that's why they were there, because they wanted that too, in the main. So they were pretty good. I had one professor she was a literature teacher and also psychology. And she would say to us, this is your time to question everything.
I love that.
And find out what you think. And so I didn't come up so much against it there, but later when I went to the University of California, um, it was a different story. People were grand and academic, and well, there were some very good people there. The atmosphere was very competitive and very rejecting of anything that might speak of another dimension of reality or deep inner experience of a different kind of consciousness. That was hard, but I was older then, and it helped to be older, and also was married to a man who was very optimistic, and it didn't have anything to do with that kind of thing. That would just, he didn't care about that kind of thing, and he would encourage me. And I also had a son that was delightful. So, your family can keep you grounded at times like that often. And I'm grateful to them that they did, so that helped, because sometimes I would leave the school and I would just think, I'm just not up to this. I can't do this, and then I did it and then kept going, But
Yeah,
I
you had
think
that support system.
yeah, the support system. And I think getting a doctorate is also, there's almost like there's that urge to make you doubt yourself, to make you think you're not worthy of it, that you can't do this, to really put you up against the test, I don't know that that's necessary. I always wanted my students to know, you can do this, you've got
Sure.
this, and that helped. But when you have to fight the other. So, but eventually, then I found the people who were very supportive. And when I did my dissertation, one person, when he read it, almost had a heart attack. And so, and he was going to question everything. But then I had another professor who was also on my committee, and she was a Jew from Vienna who'd been in concentration camps during World War II, and she knew what suffering was. She knew what longing for meaning was, and she was just supportive. And so she said, "Okay, let's come over to my house. Let's go through the whole dissertation, and let's see what you absolutely want to keep and what we can get rid of that was superfluous, or at least not necessary. I didn't have to, support that." And then he ended up supporting it full-heartedly. So it's just, it's those are the those are the challenges. But I think that's part of the labyrinth, maybe too, is that I just thought, I'll quit before I'll go along with it. But I didn't have to, as it worked out.
Do you think that you got any pushback for being a woman during those times as well? Because to have such a strong desire and it be backed with knowledge and experience, I'm sure you may have been threatening to some people.
Well, first of all, when I was still in high school and going to go to college, people would say, well, the general public, what do you want to go to college for? You're just going to get married and have children. That's a pretty big job. And I said, well, I want to know all I can if I do that, I want to be better at it. And my dad, born in 1898, can you imagine? My dad was, he had only been able to go through the 8th grade, but he was smart, as so many people are who have not gone all the way through school. He was smart, and he was very sensitive. There was a brother and me, and we were just equal. He didn't act like because I was a girl I couldn't do something, unless it was something physical, that I obviously couldn't do. But so he would just say, "Oh, don't pay attention to them," and I didn't. So, and it didn't bother me because I knew what I wanted. My family supported whatever it was. They had no. It was totally up to me, whatever I did, and. But then when I went to graduate school, I remember when the one professor that I had to see first says, "Well, what are you here for? Women's studies?" That kind of thing. Was so there was that, but I think that's changed a lot now. That was in the that was in the 70s when I went back for my graduate work, late 70s. So I think it's changed a lot now too. But yeah, I think probably some. And to be honest, I think there were some advantages sometimes because I was a woman. That's kind of crazy too. But I could see that there were so many things that could have held me back, prejudices among them, they could have. And I saw other people struggling for different reasons.
Mhm. You mentioned that you lost your son, and I'm terribly sorry to hear that. I wanted to ask you, what was motherhood like for you, and how did losing your son affect your journey?
Well, I was about 34 and a half when we finally came to the point that we were back in the States, we were living in Europe, we came back here, and we wanted to have a child. And so, and I was teaching. It was just great because I was teaching so many things that I was so excited that I was going to have a child. And when I found out it was a boy, I thought, oh my goodness, I don't know anything about boys. And and then I thought, well, wait a minute. I had a father very close to my brother and a husband. I'll learn. And I really think that he did. He taught me a lot because here I could see the male growing up, and I could see that when he looked out as he became a teenager and looked out at the world, it was like, I don't think I want that. Where were those male models that if you want to have some meaning and purpose in your life, where do you find that? But I'd have to say, first of all, it was a joy. And then
Mhm.
I learned so much just being a mother to a young boy and watching him grow up and go through the struggles that you go through when you confront this world. And also when you see um, that worldview, and at that time, I I didn't really know either for sure what was going on, but I would just say we just have to be open. We just have to, find it in ourselves, be open to it, and so I would say he taught me a lot. And of course, I thought while he was alive that if anything happened to him, I would die. But when it happened, there was we realized very often that there's a great strength in us that we didn't know we had. And I felt along there was something meaningful to this, some reason for this. And then after he died, both my husband and I were in touch with his consciousness. And my first book, The Miracle of Death, There's Nothing But Life, is is a book about all of those experiences that we had with him, and that changed our lives. And my husband hadn't been interested, in this journey, really. He was delightful and a great anchor, and he was respectful of my interests, but he wasn't. But 2 weeks before our son Ph.D. was in the accident, car accident, he was in his office here, and he suddenly saw Ph.D., our son Ph.D.'s car on the side of the freeway, and he saw his body superimposed on the top, and he knew he was dead because it was two different dimensions. And then he heard himself say, oh, that's right. It's almost time for you to do this. And then he heard Ph.D. answer him and say, that's right, Dad. I'll be out of the house for a little while. And he didn't know what that meant. Later, we realized that he did come back in the visions. And so the very first journey that my husband had was with him, and it was so powerful. He said afterwards, I had no idea what you were talking about because he had never had a vision or even an important dream that he could remember. And he said, I will never look at the world in the same way again. And he didn't. He became my anchor because I had then to deal with that horrible indoctrination from the university that I didn't believe, but on an unconscious level, it had brainwashed me into when I would have a vision, I knew this is the reality I've been looking for. This is real. There's no question. I mean, to question it would have been hilariously funny. To question it was so real. It's real.
Mm.
But then afterwards, my left brain, the rational part of me, would attack it, and try to demand evidence of the left brain type of evidence. And I came to realize the right brain and the heart are the visionaries in us. And they do not need that kind of evidence. They need the evidence that you experience it. And with the experience, you know it. So, of course, I wrote the book, and the faculty at the college where I taught were wonderful. They loving, kind, wonderful. But I couldn't really talk to them about the visions. I tried to. One person that I had taught with, I really liked him. We were good friends. When I tried to tell him, he started walking backwards and had to go somewhere fast.
Mm.
And so, but the others, I could never really talk with them about it. It's but you know, that's part of the journey, is that there are those that we can talk to and who absolutely know what we're saying, and it's not so lonely. But there are lonely periods because of that, you know, as you have indicated already.
I think it's a language, and once you learn to speak it, when others hearing you speak it, they'll be able to recognize it. But if you try to speak that language with someone who doesn't know it, it doesn't
That's
get anywhere.
true. That's true. And what I've come to realize is that, like in your journey and my journey, that when any one of us takes that journey in the labyrinth, and there'll be lonely periods, and there'll be periods when we find people who do, oh, are they ready to hear it? And they have their stories to tell. We realize that when we open that up, we make it easier for those who are coming behind us. That it's a really important, not only do we save our own soul, so to speak, but we also change the field, because we now know that when we have a thought, it's immediately reflected in the energy or biofield that we're living in. And that thought is reflected back to us. And that changes the field. So as long as we can hold that and we keep moving and growing and opening, the field is changing, and it makes it easier for those who come after us.
Mm. That's beautiful. All right, so I want to ask you a question to kind of transition into what you do, and to kind of tap into some of your knowledge. And this may seem like a simple question, but what is consciousness?
Yeah, that's been a big question, that, you know, how in the world do you find what that is? Uh, I think there's so many ways of defining it. For instance, the left brain would say that it's facts, and the left brain can only look at those facts and evaluate them. It does not have the ability to know meaning or purpose or the context. And we're in a left brain world, and that's why they've defined consciousness as brilliance, if you know a lot of things and you can do a lot of things in the outer world. But if you suggest any meaning or purpose, they don't know what you're talking about, because they're caught and severed from the right brain and heart. We now know that the heart is the fifth brain component. It gives more to the brain than the brain gives to the heart. And there's a huge electromagnetic field that extends maybe 10 to 12 feet away from us. So that when we're together, that energy field we affect each other with it. I mean, it's just, but the right brain would describe, and the heart would describe consciousness as experiencing who we really are. And it has been given words such as Christ consciousness or cosmic consciousness. It's realizing that our heart is connected to the energy field of the heart of the world, of the cosmos. And now scientists even say, through heart math, some of the scientific experiments they've done, that the heart seems to be connected to a field that is not limited by space and time as we know it, which is amazing, isn't it? So
Amazing.
we really are, well, someone has described it this way, is that the heart is like a torus energy field. You know, it goes out from the heart and then comes back to the heart. And that they're now thinking that all the systems, the planets and the systems in the cosmos, are also toroid. They have these same torus energy fields, and that we are a part of all of that. It starts, let's say, with the atom, and you think of like a Russian nest of dolls. Here's the atom, then here's a human being, and then the Earth, the planet Earth, and then the galaxy, the solar system, and the galaxy, and the cosmos. We are an integral part of that system. And that system is holographic, which means that all of the information of the field is available at every point in the field. And we have, because we have a heart and we're connected to the heart of the cosmos, we have the ability to feel, to know through feeling, to love, to have compassion. This has been negated in our culture, but we're bringing it back today. And that gives us a tremendous way of experiencing consciousness. So consciousness from the heart is much, much broader than from the left brain. So it is felt wisdom, knowing, just simply knowing. And I think we're capable of cosmic consciousness. And we are capable of that. We just have to remember that we are and find ways of experiencing it. I think my voice must be raspy.
Wow. I, you know, you mentioned like our culture kind of, I guess, dumbs down everything we are and everything we can know.
Absolutely.
So to hear you speak about these things is just incredible. And you've done so much research that even go back in time and, tell us what these people knew back in the day that like it's stunning because we feel like we are so advanced now, but they were also very advanced then too. And your studies have taken you into a deep dive into ancient traditions, myths, and teachings. How might these offer some modern day insight for us?
It's profound. And I think the fact that we think that we are at the peak, the apex of consciousness and knowing and knowledge is a delusion. Because there were those who came before us who knew what I've just been talking about. And so what would be the goal of a civilization who knows that? It would be to structure that civilization in a way that each of us could become conscious to the degree that we sought. And that was true of ancient civilizations. For instance, ancient Egypt did exactly that. They had what they called, it was like the cosmic knowledge, or the cosmic scientific knowledge, you might say. There were many ways to describe it, but they knew the laws of creation. And their temples, all of the temples that were laid out, each one was a part of that scientific knowledge of who we are in the universe. And everything in those temples was structured for us to awaken when we are in a particular temple or that chapter of science, which would include our experiential knowledge, wisdom. Then it would be knowledge through illumination. We simply would know it, not from the left brain facts. When we were in that temple, it's like an alembic in which we are transformed, and we simply know that. We have the experience of it. And if we studied in all of the temples, then we would end up in the one temple, that the temple of man, which is actually a temple structured like a person who has achieved cosmic consciousness. This is how aware they were. And they knew vibrations, they knew frequencies, they knew their temples, for instance, were built with orientation to the frequencies of the earth, and with the orientation of the stars, and with stone and water, electromagnetics, and of course the human being, as Freddie Silva says so beautifully, the human being is an aggregate of the field. What he thinks or feels affects the field, and the field affects him. It's full of consciousness, but it's opening up those potentials in the human being. And Egyptian culture was focused on that. And we Are we focused on that? We are denying that that even exists. And because of our misunderstanding of evolution, Egyptologists thought, whatever comes later is better than. So when they couldn't even see what was going on in Egypt, they said that they were barbarians. I mean, because they had no concept of consciousness, of the other dimensions that we are a part of. We are nested like the Russian dolls in these larger dimensions. And so we can't evolve alone. There's no such thing as that. There was the theory in the West that we had to just, put aside the right brain and the heart and have develop the left brain. And then after that's developed, then we could go back and pick up. Yeah, well, it's just nonsense because we can't develop separately. Our development is interrelated with everything that is. And so these ancient cultures were aware of that. And for instance, in Africa, the San Bushmen, I was so incredibly impressed with them. The West, of course, looked down on them. Who are they? They're just primitive people running around in the desert, because we were describing them from our limited ability to see and feel and know. Well, what we really have discovered is that these people, they say for 65,000 years, they have been able to achieve cosmic consciousness. Now, the archaeologists would say that around the time of the cave cultures, they were also experiencing this, but they dance. They have their own techniques of dancing and chanting, sometimes for a very long time. And then they go into cosmic consciousness. And all of the stone art around reflects actually their experiences in the other world. So here these people own nothing. They live in the desert, they move from place to place, and yet they have developed what we have not developed. If a group of them is out hunting, the other group already at home for the moment, they know that they are coming home with food. It's just they have that connected consciousness. And if those who are away, sometimes it'll be like a fluttering at the heart, and they know someone is trying to get in touch with them. And so they stop and listen. I mean, they are so, in terms of consciousness, they're so beyond us. And the wonderful thing is they're absolutely delightful people. I mean, so full of joy and goodwill and happiness. It's just something that we just couldn't understand. And I think one historian calls them a murdered culture, because from all sides, people have disregarded them and tried to kill them and take their land. And there are only a few now left, but most of them are shamans, men and women. And there was an American who had an experience that it was a cosmic consciousness, and he didn't know what to do with it. He went to MIT, and then later, when he was teaching, he had an offer of a job in South Africa. And about, I don't know, sometime before he was to leave, he had a dream. And he saw as a map where he was to go. And so when he got there, he got a guide, they took him. And as he was crossing the desert, the San people some of them were running toward him. And when they came, they said, "Oh, we are so happy to see you. We have waited for you for so long." And he spent many, many years off and on with them, and he could see who they were. And so they allowed him to release or record their teachings. And it's the teachings of the San Bushmen. But they wouldn't trust anybody else because they knew no one else would hear them. They couldn't understand them. But he could see. Yeah, he could see and hear and know. And his name, his name is Bradford Keeney. Yeah. Kim, could you look up that book? I want to just get the exact title in case someone wants to get their teaching. Beautiful people. They sort of remind us what we've lost in terms of joy in the world, In spite of everything, they could be joyful. Yes, it's the way of the Bushmen as told by the tribal elders, spiritual teachings and practices of the Kalahari. It's another name, but it's of the Sand Bushmen. Yeah, beautiful teachings.
It's funny because when people hear about shamans or these people that may have some sort of spiritual knowledge, the first thing they think is, oh, that's woo woo, or they're tapping into something that is demonic or anti-Christ and things of that nature. But if you can prove with irrefutable evidence that these things exist and that it's just a part of our experience, I think that kind of nullifies all of the mis the misinformation about it.
I think so. And I so dislike that woo-woo response, because it is based on ignorance, as a harsh way of saying it, or it's based on not knowing, and it's based on being in a culture that has promoted that because of its not knowing. And as I write in Merchants of Light, there was tremendous censorship of actual experience. In 621, the first Jewish temple was a shaman mystic temple, very similar to the Egyptian, very powerful. And in 621, the Deuteronomists and the leaders, those in power, completely destroyed it. And from then on, there was a different story. And then when there was a revival of that ancient shaman mystic tradition, when Jesus was born, because there were many Jews who didn't go along with what had happened, and they were mystics. So they were the Essenes or the Therapeutae in Egypt, and Jesus may have been a part of that. But he was a revival of that shaman mystic tradition of the early Hebrews, of the early Jewish temple, first temple. But when the church came, then they denied him the mystic of who he was. They rejected all text that had anything to do with him as a mystic and made him into a god that we must worship outside of ourselves. But what he wanted to teach, and we know this from the Nag Hammadi texts, which were condemned by the church, and we didn't find them until 1945 after World War II. In those texts, we see why the church didn't want them. Jesus says, when you drink from my lips, you and I are one. And that if you can bring forth what is within you will save you. But if you do not bring forth what is within you will destroy you. And then he also said, it is not enough that you follow the Christ. You must become the Christ. Well, the church didn't want that. So that was certainly, it was wonderful evidence for people who sought more than just believing and being saved by an outside force and not having the actual experience. So I'm trying to remember now, what was your original question that I got
I
a
don't
little off?
remember either. It's okay. I could listen to you for days. Thank you for sharing that. I wanted to go back and touch a little bit on the ancient structures because a lot of them were designed with specific energetic purposes. And I wanted to ask if you can explain a little bit about how they understood and incorporated the flow of energy in these designs and the significance of them.
Mhm. Yes, I want to do that. But I think what we were talking about is that if we could prove something,
Sure.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yes.
And I think what Jesus wanted to teach is that uh, the proof is in the experience. And we know it, you know it when you experience it. And there's no way that we can transfer that to someone else intellectually. They have to experience it. However, there are many, many studies now that do prove it in a way, because with the near-death experiences, there were the near-death experiences, there were millions and millions and millions of near-death experiences, not just from our time, but now we know from all times and from all ethnic groups, people all around the world. This is a good piece of evidence that something's going on when we die. And sometimes a person who's had a near-death experience sees everything that's going on in the operating room, and he also knows what's going on in the world. And one man saw that up on a floor, several floors above where he was, there was a red tennis shoe on the windowsill outside the room. They checked, it was there. So that's a kind of proof is good. And then there are just so many things. One person who wrote about this said, you can't just dismiss everything as anecdotal when people have experiences. Said that's not scientific, because if people are giving what you call anecdotal experiences from all walks of life about communicating after death or communicating, when the person is dying, all of these things, he said, the abundance of evidence is proof in itself, and we need to recognize that and quit dismissing it as anecdotal evidence. But anyway, back to the temples. I wish we knew how that worked. I think the science and spiritual tradition of alchemy was the science of how these energies work, how it works in transforming the body. And the Egyptians were alchemists, and I think many people were. And I do think we can say now that probably is from an earlier civilization. I think there's enough evidence for that, but I won't go into that at this point. But it is a tradition of transformation, of transforming a base metal, which is ordinary consciousness of the left brain, we could say, into this vast cosmic consciousness. So, but the actual temples were constructed in such a way. And the interesting thing is that these builder gods, as they were called, have appeared in many different times in history. For instance, in the High Middle Ages, when the Gothic cathedrals were built, these people knew how to build temples that would be like an alembic, an alchemical alembic for transformation when we walked in it, when we were in it. And so they... exactly how that works, I think, is part of that science of alchemy and still a mystery to most of us. But our bodies are an alembic. So when we walk into an alembic, and with certain attitudes and intentions and frequencies in that building that the building creates, we can have an experience. That was the intention. How it worked, really, I don't know.
Do you know much about sacred geometry, and was that part of the architectural design of these buildings?
Absolutely. And if I left that out, that was a flaw. Yes, sacred geometry, along with all the other things I said the temples or cathedrals have to have. Absolutely, sacred geometry is a part of everything. And we need to know more about that and understand it. It's the structures that we build and live in are so important. And I remember reading how the Native Americans, they had the round teepee. The roundness was very, very important for them. Well, that's a sacred geometrical design, you might say, or shape. And then when the white man came and took them off their land and put them in square houses, they said, we can never survive like this. So I think that what they were reflecting back to us is that what our ancestors reflected is that the structures that we live in, the structures that we build, are very important for our development or our dumbing down. And sacred geometry has those secrets, because these shapes are archetypal, and they follow the laws of the universe, you might say. Let me try to clear that up. The Sufis and many mystics would say there are three great dimensions. One is pure intelligence, pure knowledge, pure intelligence and pure knowledge, sacred, pure spirit, no forms whatsoever. But it's always flowing into another dimension, which is the archetypal world. And in the archetypal world, this pure energy then takes shape. And the shape it takes is sacred geometry, or the symbols that lead us to our fulfillment of our potential. You know, when you have a dream and you have these archetypal symbols, well, they are symbols that are guiding us in our development. And that's that pure energy taking form, taking a symbolic, archetypal, or geometrical form. And then the third dimension is the material. Those are the laws that create matter. So if we're in matter, if we follow those sacred dimensions of geometry, or we follow our own archetypal dreams or experiences, then we are in harmony with nature and we can develop more easily. But you know, today we have the postmodern world that's saying there are no laws, there are no metamyths, there's no intrinsic meaning in anything. And that's where the left brain has taken us, to this dead end. But I think it is the fifth renaissance, as I say in the Merchants of Light. We are awakening. In this period, we're awakening once again to who we are. And we have to really wake up, because if we don't make it this time, we might be transhumanized into something that isn't human. This is really a crossroads for us now.
I think to dispute irrefutable evidence is just arrogant. I mean, I would describe it as the arrogance of ignorance, and it just is silly.
Well, my words exactly. It's because the arrogance, you know, I found pretty early in life that every time I thought I was absolutely certain about something, that I probably was wrong. That to be a little cautious here, because we do have to be open. But arrogance is based on a lack of knowledge. You cannot be arrogant when you know a few things. You just can't. You just know there's so much you don't know,
Right.
and you have to just be open and do the best you can. Get the information and the factual knowledge and the experience within, and work with it the best you can, and with others. But the arrogance always displays a left brain limitation.
Sure. Are psychedelics and consciousness in the same, I guess, conversation?
Absolutely, they are. And when I was teaching mythology, I also taught that. I knew that many of the sacred places used sacred medicine. And we now know that probably the cave cultures did also, because there were many psychedelic plants, you might say, available at that time in their area. And there's evidence of it in the caves. And now the Sand people had a technique. They're in the desert, so probably was none of these things growing, I don't guess, anywhere. But they worked out a different technique, and other cultures have different techniques. But yes, sacred medicine is a gift, I would say, to the human being, because when we work with a sacred plant, we're allowing the voice of nature to work with us. And that opens up aspects of the brain that are very, very difficult to open up without that. It's like co-creating with nature. I like to look at it in that way. And so when I was teaching mythology, and for instance, at Greece and Eleusis, the sacred mystery school, there was a sacred medicine that everyone drank at a given point after a lot of other experiences. And they all knew, and never questioned again, that there was no death. They absolutely knew, because they experienced the other world. And so when I was teaching, I thought, I can't teach these things if I don't know about sacred medicine. And I'd studied it, I'd read about it, and that kind of thing. But I decided that, yes, I have to work with sacred medicine in order to know. And I did. When I went to South America, I did. And when I came back, I did also, for an extended period of time. And then after our son died, my husband and I both did. We had spontaneous experiences. My husband it was like he was overdue to wake up, he said, because he said even on the way to work, it was like a tape recorder going, reminding him. But he also worked with sacred medicine, and and I did too. And our son Ph.D. was present. And it was just the consciousness and the knowledge that comes when working with the spirit of the earth in this way is I don't even have a word for it. It's sacred. It's so
Sure.
valuable. Now, in the 60s, I was teaching during the 60s and 70s. And of course, here, that the cat was out of the bag, so to speak, but there were no elders to guide them, so to speak. So people were, doing drugs and not in safe places. I had an older man whose son had gone to Berkeley and had worked with LSD, but they were on the roof. And it was in ecstasy with LSD, but he stepped off the roof. He didn't know he was doing so, but he stepped off the roof and was killed. These are, nobody knew, they didn't know what to do or how much or how, it was just chaos.
Sure.
And, but I think people are learning more, the sacredness of it and how to use it in a sacred context, not to party, so to speak, but
Yes.
a sacred context. And yes, it is extremely powerful in the development of consciousness. I think that there are other techniques that are also powerful, but I think of this as working with nature in a way that we might not be able to otherwise. And
I
for our
love the way you
ancestors,
describe that.
yeah, and our ancestors wanted more than anything to know the laws of nature, which would be the laws of pure spirit as it moves in the archetypal world into matter, is to be in harmony with that, And with a shaman, every time you do anything to go into the other world, you create the circle and you ask the spirit world to protect you and have only the consciousness in that circle that you choose. You protect yourself because they know the importance of other kinds of consciousness out there in the world. So you
Sure.
protect yourself. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. With all of this knowledge, especially understanding um, quantum physics and sacred geometry and just, energy and things of that nature, if someone um, wanted to, I guess, today use these principles in a simple way, like home design or daily rituals or mindfulness, what can they do to connect with consciousness properly today?
Mhm. Yeah, and I wish I knew more about quantum physics and sacred geometry. I don't, but I know enough to know that it's sacred.
Sure.
And I think, when we're at home and we don't know, there is a saying that when the student is ready, the master will appear. And we hope that's true. But I think at home, I think it's to have a sacred place where you can be alone and quiet and uninterrupted and create that sacred space of protection around you. And then for beginning, we just put our intentions, the heart, out to the world, out to the field. These are our intentions. I choose this. I choose to be this. I choose to know this. Heart math has a technique in which you you switch your focus and go inward, and you breathe, and then you connect with the heart. But the way you breathe is you breathe in, counting 4, and then just exhale, counting 6. And if you do that, even for just 3 minutes, you nourish the immune system and the healing energy in you. There's a whole list of scientific things that it actually does for you. And when you go to bed at night, you can just sit up for a while and do that kind of breathing, and it's very, very helpful. But if you're in home trying to figure out what to do to have another kind of consciousness, I think you do that, and then always connect with the heart, because the heart is what connects us to the heart of the universe. The feeling is so important. Without feeling, we can't experience anything, really. And that's the trouble with the left brain and artificial intelligence, that's dangerous. Feeling is a way of knowing on a deeper level. And the Egyptians knew that if you did not love, their energy was symbolized in the fiery serpent goddess. If you did not love her, she could destroy the world. But if you loved her, she could reveal all her secrets. So love is a way to higher consciousness. So I think that for starters at home, that we simply put our intentions out there. This is what we choose to be. choose to know, choose to live. And very simple. But Heart Math is a very good organization to get more techniques from.
Thank you for that. Okay, I have a personal question for you. Um, you've delved into profound ancient wisdom, spiritual transformation, and the awakening of consciousness. What is it that you hope people will experience most through your work, not just intellectually, but emotionally and spiritually?
You know, I want people to experience what we all need to know, and that is that we are sacred people. We are sacred beings, and we have everything within us to experience cosmic consciousness. That is the intention within the human species. That is, as Carl Jung, the
Mm,
psychiatrist from Switzerland, said, an acorn seeks to become a full grown oak tree. Well, it's the same with the human being. That seed in us seeks to fulfill and achieve its full potential. And so I want people to know that we are sacred, we are divine, and we have within us the potential to experience Christ consciousness. And this is what those who are in power and are left-brainers don't know. And from 621 BCE, they have been censoring everything that would tell us that. Like Nag Hammadi text, in which he said, "You and I are one. When you drink from my lips, that is, when you know who you are, we are one." That those in power have always tried to make us think we're nobody. It's like the tree in the Garden of Eden was always a tree filled with fruit that the god and the goddess offered to human beings. When the Deuteronomists came in, they forbade the eating from the tree. You don't deserve it, and they expelled from the garden. You don't deserve to be in the garden. You're sinful, and all of your offspring will be sinful. It was it was not a true myth. It was a lie constructed to make us feel like we're nobodies. And so what I would want people to know is that we are constantly being censored by people who say we're flawed. We need to follow the Christ. And he said, no, it's not enough to follow me. You must become the Christ. So it's always to follow the Christ. Now it's to follow science, although that science is censoring other scientists who disagree with it. We saw that during the pandemic. So no, we must go within, and we have everything there. And there's a Frenchman has done a documentary of uh, Merchants of Light, and it's on YouTube, Merchants of Light by Anthony Shen. And the people who've been writing to me and also that make the comments, it's like, yeah, I knew that. I knew I was, it's this, and that's need to be awakened in us, that we're not going to put up with this nonsense that we need give me artificial intelligence that helps me to walk or do something, but not to take away my humanity, because that is divine. And we're just learning who we are and how to fulfill that with love and compassion. And that's where wisdom comes from. Intelligence, deep intelligence comes from the heart. So I would want us all to remember, myself to remember, because we always get to those places, that with the world telling us you're nobody, the place that, we could begin to believe that. No, we are divine beings, and we have such potential to fulfill, each one of
Thank you
us
for
in his or
that.
her own way.
That was beautiful. Thank you for that. Okay, I have another personal question for you. If there was one thing that you want to be known for, or would define your legacy, what would you want that to be?
Just that I spent my life looking for meaning and purpose. What that I searched, and I didn't go along with the official narrative.
Mm,
In order to search for that, you have to kind of be a dissenter and willing to be that. And yeah, that I spent my life looking for a truth that will heal all of us.
mm. Thank you. Thank you. All right, last question. If you could use your platform to educate anyone who might be struggling with understanding deeper things about consciousness and spirituality, but might be uncertain on how or where to start, what would you say?
Hmm. That's a big one, isn't it? Because there's so many people who suffer from the things society says about them, for one thing, and they suffer because of this lack of feeling good about themselves, being flawed in some way. So I think we have to start with trying to get in touch with our own feelings. What do we feel? What do we want? That's the first step. What is it that I want? What is it that I'm feeling that I really want in my life? And then I think that we will be guided, into how to answer that. In my case, it was a lifetime,
Hmm.
a long time. But there are many wonderful things along the way, little things that we learn or big things we learn along the way and experience. And we love and we have joy in life. There's so many aspects of life, but always that deep desire to know a truth, that will guide us.
You mentioned something earlier, and it just popped back in my mind. You said, and I may not be quoting you correctly or perfectly, so feel free to tell me if I'm not. But you said something about the heart breaking in order to create an opening.
Oh, yeah, that was from Khalil Gibran, and Palestinian, and well, actually, he was living in Lebanon at the time he was writing, um, in which he said, that how can the heart be opened lest it be broken? And I think that the deep experiences we have that break our hearts open our hearts in a way that we could never imagine. It just seems to be true. But I think our heart is also opened in so many ways. With loving opens our heart, makes us vulnerable. I mean, our willingness to be totally vulnerable when we love. All of the feeling and compassion and desire, um, and vulnerability. But I have to say, in my own case too, that when I experienced what I never wanted to experience, is that it was the deepest, heartbreaking experience of my life. But at the same time, it had the power to open my heart in a way that I couldn't have imagined and open it to the other dimension. Sometimes that doesn't happen. Sometimes people get caught in the grief that they can't get beyond, and it doesn't open their heart. It just breaks their heart. And we want to always have a culture that can provide ways to open the heart when people are suffering, to
Mm.
give them, to help them. But yeah, I think that's what Khalil Gibran meant, is that, but sometimes you have to say the heart is just broken into shattered pieces and that you just can't see how it can be opened. It's just shattered. And I think that is what we have to try to avoid doing. And I think this country has done a great deal of shattering of hearts. And that makes us stop and pause, because when that should never happen. The heart can be broken, but not shattered.
Mm. Well, thank you for sharing that. I have truly, truly, truly enjoyed this conversation with you and the opportunity to share space with you and allow you to share your vast and deep knowledge and wisdom. It has been
Thank
such an
you.
honor and a pleasure.
Oh, thank you. And I'm so happy to meet you and see what you're doing, and maybe another time we can talk about those ancient cultures more or whatever. I'd be
Sure.
delighted at any time you feel like it. So thank you so much.
I appreciate that. Where can people find you online?
Well, it's kamlak.com, Kamlak. And we have a newsletter, and if people sign up for the newsletter, they'll get a chapter of Merchants of Light. And there are articles there and webinars and videos and films and things like that that I've done. So they can, and my email is there too. So,
Okay,
uh,
great.
yeah.
And what about your books?
Pardon me?
Where can people find your books?
Oh, well, there at that very place, you
Okay.
can order the books from Comlock. And I usually inscribe them if you want them inscribed when you order them from Comlock. And yeah, it would be, and get the newsletter to see what's going on.
Sure. All right, Dr. Kovacs, again, I want to say thank you so much for this. Thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for who you are. Thank you for what you do. And thank you for how you do it.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. It's just been a pleasure to meet you. So keep in touch.